fantasy football right around the corner. Here's the top 30 wide receivers I got ranking heading into the season. The first guy is Tyreek Hill of the Kansas City Chiefs. Tyreek Hill, what a magical season once again last year for the Freak. And the Cheetah, this guy's the quickest guy in the NFL, no doubt about it. And once he's behind that secondary, there's no catching him. And now he's got the best quarterback in the league over the last few seasons. He's got the most explosive offense in the league with the Chiefs. And this guy's unguardable. And he put up a monster year last year. Even had 123 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns, 87 catches, 1,276 receiving yards, and a whopping 15 touchdowns. So those are some numbers right there for Tyreek Hill. And it was close between him and Davante Adams, who I was going to put number 1 at wide receiver. But I trust Hill just a little bit more, and I trust his quarterback just a little bit more, even though him and Rodgers were pretty much neck and neck last season. So the projections this year here for Hill, 87 catches, 1,264 receiving yards, and 13 receiving touchdowns. So right now he's going in the first round, anywhere from the 8th to the 10th pick overall. And I think that's a totally good area to get Tyreek Hill. The second wide receiver going into the year is Davante Adams, Green Bay Packers. So Davante Adams, we know he's a stud. We know he's been one of the best wide receivers over the last 4 or 5 seasons in the NFL. But this season, he wants to get paid big money. And this could be possibly last season for him and Aaron Rodgers over here in Green Bay, with both guys leaving or whatever. So last season for Davante Adams, an amazing year, 115 catches, 1,374 receiving yards, an amazing 18 touchdowns. So when this guy's healthy, he's a touchdown machine, and that's what he was last season. So Adams here, he put up elite numbers, and him and Hill are neck and neck, like I mentioned here, with Tyreek Hill slightly just above Davante Adams because of his playmaking ability being just a little bit better. But Adams this season, he's going about 10th overall in fantasy drafts, and they're projecting him 112 catches, 1,399 receiving yards, and 13 touchdowns. So you can't go wrong with either guy, in my opinion, here. But I just got Hill 1, Adams 2. They're both studs, and they're going to have big seasons. Once again, number 3, DeAndre Hopkins, the Arizona Cardinals. So some people, they got Stefon Diggs and Calvin Ridley even over Hopkins. But Hopkins last season, in his first season with the Cardinals, 115 catches, 1,407 receiving yards, only 6 touchdowns, which obviously is a little bit of a disappointment. But I think in his second season over there in Arizona, with him and Kyler Murray, they're going to get on the same page. Because we saw early in the year, Hopkins, he was having bad body language and even screaming at Kyler Murray at times on the sidelines or in the huddle over there in Arizona. But I think they're going to get things going. And hey, he still put up 1,400 yards last season. We just need to see a few more touchdowns for him. And this year, they're projecting 100 catches, 1,294 yards, and 9 touchdowns. Hopkins is a stud, no doubt about it. And he's a wide receiver who I got ranked number 3, and he's going about anywhere to 17 to 20 overall in fantasy drafts. And this guy, he's going to put up numbers, and I think he's a little bit more consistent than Ridley and Stefon Diggs, in my opinion, here. So I got him at number 3. Number 4, I got Stefon Diggs of the Buffalo Bills. So they traded for Diggs last season with the Bills, and it turned their whole franchise around. Josh Allen had the best season of his young career. He put up insane numbers. And Stefon Diggs had the best season of his career and led the league in catches. Last year, 127 catches, 1,535 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. So it was a magical season for Stefon Diggs, and one many Buffalo Bill fans and fantasy owners won't forget. So right here, they got him going 11th overall. But I think this season, Stefon Diggs, he's still going to have a great year, but I don't think he's going to have a better year than Hopkins, Adams, and Hill. That's why I got him in number 4. But he fit that Buffalo Bills system like a glove. And him and Josh Allen was one of the best 1-2 quarterback wide receiver combos in football we've seen in a long time last season. But this year, I think the numbers are going to go down just a bit. They're projecting him 116 receptions, 1,552 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. And hey, he could definitely put those numbers up again or better, like they're projecting him here, is Stefon Diggs. But right now, we'll see what happens with him. But you can't go wrong with Diggs, no doubt about it. This guy's talented. And last season he showed if he had a better quarterback than Kirk Cousins, he could put up big numbers, and that's exactly what he did. So right here, between Diggs, Hopkins, and Adams, you can't go wrong in any order with all of those guys. But right here, I just have it, ranked and prioritized how I would do it. The next wide receiver I got ranked DK Metcalf at number 5 for the Seattle Seahawks. So DK Metcalf, he's a freak athlete. This guy's like a deer out there on the field. And last season, what a year it was in his second season. 83 catches, 1,303 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns for Metcalf. So Metcalf, he was a man amongst boys last season with the Seattle Seahawks team. The only thing with him is he slowed down later on as the season went on. And him and even Russell Wilson had a little bit of problems, I believe. But this season, I think Metcalf's going to put up similar numbers or even better, where he might catch 100 balls this year. But they're projecting him pretty much the same amount stats as he did last season. 83 catches, 1,298 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. So this guy right now, he's ranked 23rd going into fantasy drafts. Anywhere from the late second to early second round, he's going in most leagues. Here's Metcalf. And he's another guy. You can't go wrong for him as your number 1 wide receiver. I got him over a few wide receivers I've seen that ranked over him. I got him over Ridley, over Justin Jefferson, and A.J. Brown as well. Number 6, Calvin Ridley of the Atlanta Falcons. So Julio Jones, he got traded to the Tennessee Titans in the offseason. And Ridley, he's the official number 1 wide receiver over there in Atlanta. And he's going to get tons of targets. He's going to get tons of opportunities. And him and Matt Ryan have been on the same page ever since Ridley came into the league a few seasons ago. So last season for Ridley, 1,374 receiving yards, 90 catches, 9 touchdowns, even had 143 targets as well. And this season they're projecting 93 catches, 1,296 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. So Calvin Ridley, they're bumping the numbers down just a bit in the receiving yard category here. But I think he'll be anywhere from 1,200 to 1,300. He's a great talent, no doubt about it. And most fantasy drafts, he's going early second round here is Ridley. Like guys like Metcalf and Diggs, just a little bit better than him because of the quarterback play. And obviously, the teams that they're on with more talent around them than Ridley. So Ridley here, you could get him early if you want. But right now, I got him as my 6th ranked wide receiver. Even though I still think he has a big year, but I like Hopkins, Metcalf, and Diggs just a little bit better than Ridley heading into the season. The next wide receiver, number 7, Justin Jefferson of the Minnesota Vikings. So Justin Jefferson, he was a rookie I was high on going into last season, and he didn't disappoint with a huge year in his rookie year. 1,400 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, 88 catches. So Justin Jefferson, he was a man amongst boys as well last season with his playmaking ability and breakaway speed. How many 200-yard receiving games did we see from him? The only thing he needs more of is Jefferson, his consistency, in my opinion. There was a few games where he only went 40 or 50 yards, and then the next game he would go for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. So if he could just be a little bit more consistent. But that also falls on Kirk Cousins as well, of not being a consistent quarterback. So if Jefferson in his second year can find consistency, this guy could be a top 1 or 2 wide receiver this season when it's all said and done in fantasy football. The projections this year, 95 catches, 1,362 yards, and 7 touchdowns. The only thing going in, he's banged up with a little bit of a shoulder injury here, is Jefferson, and he's been putting in limited practices so far in training camp. But this guy's a stud. He's a monster, and I expect another big year out of him this year. Number 8, Keenan Allen of the Los Angeles Chargers. So Keenan Allen last season, what a year he had with the impressive rookie Justin Herbert at the quarterback position. Keenan Allen, he goes out there, and he's just a wide receiver catching machine. One of the best possession receivers we've seen in this league over the last 5 or 10 seasons here is Keenan Allen. Last year, 100 receptions, only 992 receiving yards, but he did have 8 touchdowns, and he was healthy, which is the main point, in my opinion. This season, I think he'll crack 1,000 yards, and he was a great PPR guy. He still put up a lot of catches. He still broke double digits a lot, and this season they're projecting Keenan Allen, 93 catches, 1,023 yards, and 8 touchdowns. So I think this year the numbers will go up more with Herbert from the start of the season. After last year was Tyrod Taylor the first couple games, and Herbert obviously not practicing with the first team in training camp and preseason. But now with Herbert coming into the year as the full starter, him and Allen, they're going to build more of a rapport. And I think Allen has a great year this year. And I got him ranked number 8, number 9 at wide receiver, Mike Evans of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So many people might think that I'm ranking Mike Evans a little bit too high here. But I think Mike Evans has another good year. And him and Tom Brady, their bond and their hookup on the field got better as the season went on. And Mike Evans, he finished the year with a huge year, 70 catches, 1,006 yards, and 13 touchdowns, which is top 5 at the wide receiver position last year was Evans. And this year, I think he's going to get double-digit touchdowns. I think once again, he's going to have a 1,000-yard season for the 6th or 7th time in a row is Evans. This guy's a playmaker. He could jump over anyone, and he's a guy that's going to get the 50-50 balls. And Tom Brady definitely believes in him and built a good rapport with him as the season went on. So last season, like I said, he had over 1,000 with the 13 touchdowns. And this season, they're projecting him 74 catches, 1,077 reception yards, and 10 touchdowns. I think he could hit the 1,200 to 1,300-yard barrier this season here is Mike Evans. We got an extra game as well, 17-game season. And like I mentioned, him and Tom Brady, they're on the same page now. And it's going to be a big year for Mike Evans this year. Number 10, A.J. Brown of the Tennessee Titans. So A.J. Brown, he was unleashed last year finally over there in Tennessee. I don't know if he'd be a bust or not, but he definitely didn't bust out, was A.J. Brown. He went off instead last season with Tennessee, even though he missed a few games with injury. He finished with 70 catches, 1,075 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns on the season. And right now, he's ranked 20th overall going into the year. And he's a guy you're going to get second or third round, obviously, is A.J. Brown to your fantasy leagues. I just like the guys a little bit better than him because their explosiveness and they're more than Brown has been over his career. And quarterback as well is a little bit better than Ryan Tannehill or the guys I mentioned. So right here, they're projecting 81 catches, 1,242 receiving yards, and 11 touchdowns here for Brown this season. So I think Brown, he'll be a total stud once again this year. And we just saw the playmaking and the breakaway speed from him last season. Like this guy, if he breaks one tackle, he's gone once he hits the second level. And now the field opens up even more for him. Well, Julio Jones opposite of him. So sky's the limit for Brown this year. And I got him ranked number 10 at the wide receiver position. 11, Scary Terry McLaurin of the Washington football team. So right here, he's going to have better quarterback play this year with Ryan Fitzpatrick, who is obviously a gunslinger. And they also signed Curtis Samuel as well here with this Washington football team to open it up and give him a number 2 option next to him here is Terry McLaurin. So last season, McLaurin, he had a good year, even though, like I mentioned, it was inconsistent quarterback play between 3 quarterbacks, Alex Smith, Dwayne Haskins, and Kyle Allen. 87 catches, 1,118 receiving yards, 4 receiving touchdowns for McLaurin. And this season, they're projecting him 91 catches, 1,261 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. So coming into the year, he's going about mid-second round to early third, and I think that's a perfect position here to get Scary Terry. He's more of a possession receiver. He's not much of a burner compared to these other guys I've mentioned, but he's a perfect number 1 or 2 wide receiver for your fantasy team coming into the year. And he's just going to put up numbers as McLaurin. He's going to be consistent, and like I mentioned, he can only get better for him from here, especially with a veteran like Ryan Fitzpatrick, who isn't scared to take chances and throw the ball deep to his wide receivers. So I like McLaurin over here at number 11. Number 12, Adam Thielen of the Minnesota Vikings. So Adam Thielen, he had a great year last year. What a 1-2 combo it was with Adam Thielen last year and obviously Justin Jefferson, who I mentioned earlier in this video. So Adam Thielen last year with Minnesota, 74 catches, 925 receiving yards, 14 touchdowns, which was top 5 in the league last season. And right now, they're not ranking him as high as I thought they would. He's going 4th or 5th round and ranked 51st total going into the season this year. But Adam Thielen, I got him right now as a number 12 wide receiver total. And hey, if you could get this guy as your number 2 wide receiver, which I've been seeing a lot in drafts so far. That's a slam dunk in my opinion because he has big games. He's been scoring a lot of touchdowns, and this season they're projecting him 78 catches, 1,000 yards, and 8 receiving touchdowns. So I think Adam Thielen's going to have a good year once again this year. And he's a guy that definitely could go out there and get the job done for fantasy owners. And I like him a lot, so I'm ranking him a little bit higher. More consistent and more healthy than some of these guys coming up on the list. Number 13, Julio Jones of the Tennessee Titans. So Julio obviously spent his whole career with Matt Ryan and the Atlanta Falcons throughout his career. But now a new beginning here for Jones. And he goes to the Tennessee Titans in a dynamic offense with Derrick Henry, A.J. Brown, and Ryan Tannehill at quarterback, who's a little similar to Matt Ryan at this point in their career. So last season was an injury-riddled year once again for Jones. 51 catches, 771 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. So the problem with Jones the last few years, it's been these soft tissue injuries, the hamstring, ankles, stuff like that. And right now he's going 47th overall in most drafts about his Julio Jones. But right here he's with a new team. He's on an explosive offense like I mentioned. And I think this season he has a good year here. Just the only issue with him is health, like I mentioned. They're projecting him 81 catches, 133 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. So right here, if he could put up those numbers this season as Jones, that's pretty solid number 2 wide receiver numbers. But I think Julio could even go above that this year if he stays healthy. We know the playmaking ability. We know he catches all those 50-50 balls for the most part. And we're going to see him do a lot of damage in a big-time offense over here like Tennessee. So I got Jones at 13. Number 14, Chris Godwin of the Tampa Bay Bucks. So Godwin last season, he just couldn't get his footing over there in Tampa with the new offense, with Tom Brady in it, obviously, and a handful of injuries as well Godwin dealt with throughout the season. But he still finished the year pretty solid, 65 catches, 840 yards receiving, and 7 touchdowns. Obviously, he wasn't going to match the season he had with Jameis Winston, where he led the league in receiving in 2019 was Godwin. But I think this season he's going to stay healthy, and I think he's going to break that 1,000-yard barrier this year in receiving. And the field is forecast for him in projections 86 catches, 1,141 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns. So right now, Godwin, he's ranked higher than these guys on most websites. He's going 3rd, 4th round of fantasy drafts. But I like those other guys a little bit better than Godwin with the consistency and just the type of offense they're in with Tom Brady here. I think he's going to spread the ball out, and we may not see many 1,000-yard receivers. And think about this too, Antonio Brown, he's going to be here a full season most likely with Tampa Bay and starting the year, obviously. So right now, Chris Godwin, I still think he has a good year, but I think those other guys like Julio, Thielen, and McLaren are going to have better years than him, where some people think he's going to have better years than those guys. So we'll wait and see. But Chris Godwin, I have right now at number 14. Number 15, Allen Robinson of the Chicago Bears. So Allen Robinson, I got him a little bit down in my rankings compared to other people, where most fantasy drafts he's going 2nd, 3rd round. I got him more as a 4th, 5th round overall taken as my number 15 overall wide receiver. So last season was a good season with Mitchell Trubisky for Allen Robinson, and obviously Trubisky isn't there, but he finished the year 102 catches, 1,250 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. So those are huge numbers for Allen. But this year he's got Andy Dalton or Justin Fields at quarterback. We'll see what happens. But I think to start the year, we're going to see Dalton. And if the Bears go off to a slow start, we're going to see by week 5, the latest probably, the impressive rookie Justice Fields. So right now they're projecting 95 catches, 1,224 receiving yards, and 8 touchdowns here for Robinson. He's a great playmaker. He's a good wide receiver. But I just don't think he's going to hit the 1,200-yard mark this season, and I think he's going to have single-digit touchdowns like they're projecting him this year for Robinson. But Robinson, he can make plays, he could get things going. But I'm just not as high on him as other people are coming into this year. Number 16, CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. So CeeDee Lamb, if it wasn't for Dak Prescott getting hurt, we were going to see a monster rookie year out of him last season. But he still put up pretty big numbers, in my opinion, last year. Fell short a little bit of 1,000 yards, 74 catches, 935 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns for CeeDee Lamb last season with the Cowboys. So coming into it here now, they got him as an early third, late second round pick in fantasy drafts. I'd take him over the guys I mentioned as Lamb. It's only his second year, and we saw inconsistencies from him, even though, like I mentioned, Dak Prescott only played 5 or 6 games last season for the Cowboys, and this year they're projecting Lamb 87 catches, 1,157 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. I definitely could see numbers like that for him, and I could see him having a little bit of a better fantasy season than his teammate Amari Cooper. But right now, I think at number 16 overall at the wide receiver position, I think it's a good ranking for Lamb, and I think he's going to have a good year, but just not the huge year like many people are projecting, where he's going to be top 10 at the wide receiver position. The next wide receiver is Cooper Kupp of the Los Angeles Rams. So Cooper Kupp, he had a pretty decent year last year, but inconsistent games as well with Jared Goff. But now with Matthew Stafford as his quarterback over there in Los Angeles, I think Cooper Kupp, it could be sky's the limit, and we're going to see some huge games out of him this season. They're ranking him in the late third, early fourth round, the fantasy draft's going. And I think that's a perfect spot to draft Kupp at that position. So last year for Kupp, 974 receiving yards, 92 catches, and 3 receiving touchdowns. I think this season he breaks 1,000 yards receiving, but the catches might go down just a bit. They're projecting him 82 catches, 1,018 yards, and 8 touchdowns. I definitely could see those numbers happening here for Cooper Kupp this season. But right now with Matthew Stafford behind center, I think the numbers will be better, and the numbers should be more consistent than when they had Jared Goff over there as the quarterback in Los Angeles. So right now I got Cooper Kupp at number 17, and he's a perfect number 2 wide receiver to have on your fantasy team this season. Number 18, Amari Cooper of the Dallas Cowboys. So him and CeeDee Lamb, it's going to be close between who's going to be the better wide receiver this season in Dallas. But I believe CeeDee Lamb has a little bit more upside than Amari Cooper. So Amari Cooper last season, he had another good year, even though with the injury to Dak Prescott, still had 92 catches, 1,114 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. So Cooper, the only thing I want to see out of him is more touchdowns this season. But I think his touchdowns will go up, but receptions might go down this year. And they're projecting him 74 catches, 1,021 receiving yards, and 5 touchdowns. But Amari Cooper, we've seen him come up with a lot of big games throughout his career as a Dallas Cowboy over the last 2 or 3 seasons here. And I think once again he's going to be a good receiver. And in my opinion, he's more underrated than overrated going into fantasy drafts. Right now, late third, early fourth round he's going. And I think that's a perfect number to get Amari Cooper. He's consistent, he catches the ball, and he's a definitely good wide receiver to have in PPR leagues, especially as Cooper. So I think he has another good year. And he's a guy going under the radar a little bit too, in my opinion. Because if Dak's healthy the whole season, he's got potential to put up 1,200 to 1,300 yards with double-digit touchdowns. The next wide receiver is number 19, Chase Claypool of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So I might have him ranked a little bit higher than most people. But this guy, he's a 5'2" wide receiver in my position. He's a 5'2" wide receiver, in my opinion. He is Chase Claypool. He can make all the routes. He can make all the catches. He gets up there for the ball, and he's got breakaway speed. And we saw him last season with a few huge games, including a 4-touchdown game versus the Cincinnati Bengals, which was his coming out party last season, was Claypool. So last year for him, 873 receiving yards, 9 receiving touchdowns, and even 2 rushing touchdowns as well. So 11 total touchdowns in his rookie season. The only thing for him is we know they got a tons of weapons over there in Pittsburgh. Deontay Johnson, Juju, if he can bounce back. You got Najee Harris, who's going to have a big rookie season, in my opinion. And they also got Eric Ebron as well. But right here, Chase Claypool, he's a great talent, in my opinion. And he's only going to get better from here. So this season, they're projecting him 1,010 receiving yards and 10 touchdowns. Those are pretty solid numbers. But I think he could up the ante here and get to 1,100 yards as Claypool. He just has that ability, and he's only going to get better, like I mentioned. So I got him at number 19. Number 20, Deontay Johnson, his teammate of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So Deontay Johnson, one of the best possession wide receivers in fantasy football and the NFL last season. So he put up numbers, he made big plays, and we're going to see it once again this year for Johnson, in my opinion, with the Steelers. So last year, 923 receiving yards, 7 touchdowns, 88 receptions for Johnson. And once again, I think he's going to be solid in the 4th or 5th round where he's going in most drafts. And they're projecting him 77 catches, 943 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. So those are pretty solid numbers. And those are number 2 to flex receiver numbers. But I think he could break 1,000 yards as well. And I got high hopes for this Steeler team, especially in the fantasy aspect of things, because I think they could put up numbers and they could be an explosive offense. But right now, with some of the projections, they're a little low in my opinion. But Johnson, as the number 20 ranked wide receiver, I think it's a good position to get him in. 21, Tyler Lockett of the Seattle Seahawks. So Lockett, he's an explosive player, no doubt about it. But last season, he only had a couple huge games, and that got most of his stats on the year with the Seahawks team. Last year, 100 catches, 1,054 receiving yards, and 10 touchdowns. But last season, he had over a 200-yard game with 4 touchdowns in that game. But he's still an explosive receiver, and he's a perfect number 2 wide receiver to have on your fantasy roster. So right now in fantasy leagues, he's going anywhere from the 4th to the 5th round in most leagues is Lockett. But just last season, the inconsistencies was the problem for me here with him, but he still finished the year with solid numbers last year. This season, they're projecting him 97 catches, 1,093 receiving yards, and 9 touchdowns. So once again, if he could put up those type of numbers, those are perfect number 2 to flex wide receiver numbers. And he's a good ball player. He don't really miss games. But the only thing, like I mentioned, he's got to be more consistent, in my opinion, is Lockett, to really have that good season this year here for the Seattle Seahawks and fantasy owners. So right now, I'm going to be a little cautious with him and rank him at number 21 is Tyler Lockett. But if you get him 4th or 5th round, I think it's pretty solid. Like I mentioned, number 22, Robert Woods of the Los Angeles Rams. So Woods here, I think he's going to benefit as well with Matthew Stafford as the quarterback over there now with the Rams. And Woods, he's going high in fantasy drafts, 3rd, 4th round right now. And last season, he put up a good year, 90 catches, didn't reach 1,000 yards, 936 receiving yards, 6 receptions. He also had 2 rushing touchdowns and 155 yards rushing. So right here, they use him as a gadget guy a little, is Sean McVay in this Los Angeles Ram offense. But now he should only benefit with Matthew Stafford at his quarterback and not Jared Goff, obviously, who don't have a stronger arm or IQ like Matthew Stafford at the quarterback position. So Robert Woods, another guy who's a perfect number 2 to flex wide receiver on your fantasy team. But like Tyler Lockett, he could be inconsistent as well at times. There could be one week he gets 40 fantasy points in PPR leagues, and then the next week he don't do much and he gets 7 or 8 points. But now, as long as Matthew Stafford stays healthy, these guys will be more consistent, in my opinion, in Cooper Kupp and Robert Woods. They've been in the last couple of years. The next wide receiver is Brandon AIYUK at number 23 of the San Francisco 49ers. So Brandon AIYUK, we saw great flashes in his rookie year. With a lot of quarterbacks as well they've gone through over there last season in San Francisco. Last year in his rookie year, 60 catches, 748 receiving yards, and 5 receiving touchdowns. Also 77 rush yards and 2 touchdowns. So over there in San Francisco, they use him and Deebo Samuel in similar ways with gadget plays, end arounds, reverses, plays like that. And right here, Brandon AIYUK, he's going to only get better, in my opinion, especially if Trey Lance is the quarterback with his big arm and his playmaking ability to get the ball to receivers and also find open lanes to get the ball to his guys. I think Brandon AIYUK could sky the limit for him this year. And the projection, 74 catches, 1,007 yards, 5 receiving touchdowns. So right now, he's going anywhere from the 4th to 5th round of fantasy drafts. And I think maybe a little bit high, late 5th, early 6th, bit better a position to get Brandon AIYUK. But no doubt about it, he's a number 2 to flex wide receiver for fantasy teams. And I expect another good year out of AIYUK this season. Number 24, DJ Moore of the Carolina Panthers. So DJ Moore, he was good again last season, even though he was inconsistent at times as well. But he still put up some big games. And some games he had one big breakaway run for 50 yards, which made his ball game was DJ Moore. Now he's got a new quarterback once again over there in Carolina. We're going to see Sam Darnold as the man on the center. Last season for Moore, he didn't catch the ball that much, 66 catches, But like I mentioned, the big breakaway speed, which led him to 1,193 receiving yards and 4 receiving touchdowns for DJ Moore. So right now, he's going anywhere from the 4th to 5th round in most fantasy leagues. And I think that's pretty good to get DJ Moore. He's definitely a number 2 to flex option. And this season, they're projecting more catches, 85 catches, 1,158 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns. We'll see what happens with Sam Darnold as the quarterback over there. But I'm still comfortable going into the season with DJ Moore as my number 2 wide receiver this year. Because like I mentioned, he's got game breaker speed and can make game breaker and playmaking plays. And that's what we saw last season from him. And I think we could even see it once again this year. Because this guy, he could take a little slant route for 10 yards all the way to the house for 50 or 60 yards. That's just the type of plays we've seen from him. And we'll see it once again, I believe, this season from DJ Moore. The next wide receiver, number 25, Jamar Chase, the rookie of the Cincinnati Bengals. So Chase and former college quarterback Joe Burrow reunited this season over here in Cincinnati. And this guy, he was the number 1 prospect wide receiver coming out in the draft. And I expect big things out of Chase this year, even though I know this Cincinnati Bengal team has 2 great receivers as well in Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins, who was a rookie last season and had a big rookie year. But I just think Jamar Chase has the most upside out of all these guys. And like I mentioned, he's already played with Joe Burrow a few seasons at LSU. So right here, I think Jamar Chase is going to do good. And he's going to be the best wide receiver on this Cincinnati team and possibly the best wide receiver in this rookie class. So this season, they're projecting Chase 980 receiving yards and 9 receiving touchdowns. And he's going about 5th to 6th round of most fantasy drafts. So right here, a lot of people know the potential. They know what Chase could do. And I think Chase has big things, and I wouldn't be surprised to see him have a Justin Jefferson type of rookie season like he did last year as Chase. But right now, I got him in number 25, and he's definitely a number 2 to flex option at the wide receiver position. Number 26 is teammate T. Higgins of the Cincinnati Bengals. So like I mentioned, T. Higgins had a big rookie season last year with Joe Burrow and this Cincinnati team. 67 catches, 908 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. So this season, he's in another year with Joe Burrow and the Bengals. And the other thing to mention, Burrow didn't complete the full season with the torn ACL, which definitely hurt all the fantasy values of the guys over there in Cincinnati. But now, hopefully, if Burrow plays a full season, I think Higgins cracks 1,000 yards and possibly could reach double-digit touchdowns. So the projections for him this season at 1,150 receiving yards and 9 touchdowns. And right now, him and Chase, they're neck to neck of where they're going in fantasy drafts. Chase was ranked 62 coming into the year and Higgins 61. But right now, I think these guys are going to put up similar numbers. But Chase, in my opinion, just has a little bit more upside. But right here, you can't go wrong with either of these Cincinnati Bengal wide receivers. And I think T. Higgins has a big year as well. So I got him, T. Higgins, at number 26. Number 27, Odell Beckham Jr. of the Cleveland Browns. So Odell Beckham, his season got cut short last year with the torn ACL. And we'll see if this year he could come back better than ever. But now the last few seasons he's been injured. And then the one full season he played, Odell, he just disappeared and he didn't do much for fantasy owners. So right now he's going 5th to 6th round. And I'm just not all enthusiastic about him at all. It's another year, another injury coming off. And who knows if he's really 100% as well as Beckham. So last season in 5 ball games for him, 43 targets, 23 catches, 319 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns. And he also added 72 rushing yards with a rushing touchdown. So Beckham, they were using him as a gadget guy as well a little bit last season with the Browns. Him and Jarvis Landry obviously played college ball together, and those guys are having fun on the same team over here in Cleveland. But Odell Beckham, one more bad injury, that could be it for him. And right now, we'll see if his explosiveness is still there, because now he's had an ankle surgery and obviously the torn ACL surgery last season. So this season, they're projecting 71 catches, 985 receiving yards, and 7 touchdowns. So I feel more comfortable as Odell Beckham as a flex option. If he's my number 2 wide receiver on my fantasy team going into the year, I just wouldn't feel that comfortable with it because he's been inconsistent and injury prone over the last 3 seasons. Number 28, Robbie Anderson of the Carolina Panthers. So Robbie Anderson, a good season last year with Teddy Bridgewater, but now him and Sam Darnold reunited this year over there in Carolina, and they had a decent rapport over there when they were on the New York Jets together for a few seasons. So Robbie Anderson last season was the most consistent Panther wide receiver, but he fizzled out a little bit towards the end of the season. But Robbie Anderson right now in fantasy drafts, he's going anywhere from the 6th to 7th round in most leagues. Last year for him, 95 catches, 1,096 yards, 3 receiving touchdowns. So all those numbers are good besides the receiving touchdowns. And this year they're projecting 1,035 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns. So let's see if him and Sam Darnold can keep it going like they did on the Jets. They had some good moments and some deep balls and stuff. But Robbie, the last few years, he's proven himself not to just only be a deep threat, but be a guy who can run the route tree, make plays, and catch the football. So right here, Robbie Anderson as a number 2 to 3 wide receiver, it's pretty safe to have him, because last season going into fantasy leagues, he was pretty much undrafted or a guy you took a flyer on in the later rounds. So right now, he's ranked 28 for me and more of a flex option. Number 29, Kenny Golladay of the New York Giants. So Kenny Golladay signed a deal with the Giants in the offseason, and already he's banged up with a hamstring injury. All reports are saying, though, he should be good to go. Week 1 is Kenny Golladay versus the Denver Broncos, but who knows? But this season, I think it's a downgrade for him either way. If he stayed in Detroit, I think he would have had more upside with Matthew Stafford as his quarterback instead of downgrading to Daniel Jones. We'll see if Daniel Jones could have the breakout year this year, because it's do or die now, in my opinion, for Daniel Jones in this offense. It's his 3rd year now. Giants used a high draft pick on him, and nothing's paid off, in my opinion, with Daniel Jones. So last season, in an injury-riddled year as well for Golladay, only 20 catches, 338 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. When he plays, he's a dynamic receiver who definitely can make plays and help fantasy teams, but I don't know if he's going to make it this year, the full season. And like I mentioned, already with the hamstring injury, that's definitely concerning. So they're projecting him 64 catches, 1,064 receiving yards, and 6 receiving touchdowns this season for Kenny Golladay. But we'll see what happens with him. So right now, I would take him probably 7th or 8th round, but he's ranked late 5th, early 6th in most fantasy drafts he's going. And I just can't take the gamble on a guy like Golladay, especially already with injuries in training camp. And the final guy at number 30 is Courtland Sutton of the Denver Broncos. So Courtland Sutton, this guy's a great playmaker. And obviously, though, last season, his season got cut short very quickly with the MCL and ACL. But this guy can make plays. Denver, I believe they're going to be trailing in a lot of ball games. But I think Teddy Bridgewater is an upgrade over Drew Lock this season at the quarterback position. So like I mentioned, Sutton, he played 1 game last season and went down after week 1. 3 catches, 66 yards receiving. And this season, he's going anywhere from the 7th to the 8th round, which I think is a perfect draft position for Courtland Sutton, because he's got upside of a potential low number 1 wide receiver on your fantasy team if he's 100% healthy and him and Teddy Bridgewater get on the same page early and often this season. So they're projecting Sutton this season 1,035 receiving yards and 6 receiving touchdowns. And we'll see if Sutton could have a good bounce back year this year after coming off the injury. But it helps to have a wide receiver like Jerry Jeudy, who's pretty decent, as his number 2 next to him to open the field up. And it's also good to have 2 decent running backs in Melvin Gordon and Javonte Williams back there in the backfield as well to get things going for the receivers and open the game up. So right here, I got Sutton at 30. So that's my top 30 wide receiver rankings entering the 2021 fantasy football season.